From the time he went to prison because he tried to kill Casey Dodo. Speaking of his wife, he even ignores the way she dies, which has some serious consequences. Voight's failure to look into the death of his wife costs a lot of other patients. Hank never looked into what happened to his wife. That's strange for an officer who typically digs deep and doesn't simply touch the surface. He just thought it was cancer, until one of the most famous crossover episodes of Chicago showed that a murderous doctor had given her too much chemotherapy.
Each brought independently to med with no connection between them, except an overdose of chemo for a cancer they don't have.
These guys are pros.
I want a copy of this in the intelligence office before we get back.
As a result, many patients who might have survived or lived longer ended up being killed by their doctors. And if there was one person Voight would have been right to give justice to, it would have been the doctor. Surprisingly, he just leaves the case up to the system.
His staffer testified that Dr. Reibold personally administered those doses.
But the staffer cut a deal.
That doesn't mean it wasn't the truth.
But when he does take matters into his own hands, he can still end up messing them up with even more consequences for others. Olinsky's death is indirectly caused by Voight's failure to deal with Bingham's dead body well. In Chicago PD, Voight gets ready to shoot the man who killed his son. Since Bingham killed Justin, he deserves to die.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Justin. He's got a pulse.
Lincoln 5021 emergency, I repeat.
Oh my
emergency.
God, he's been shot. Who's putting out the bad dope?
I told you.
But the sergeant's choice to make him dig his own grave before he's buried there has major consequences. Denny Woods finds the body later and uses it to blame Olinsky for the crime. Weeks later, Olinsky gets attacked in jail. People still feel sad over Alvin Olinsky's death because he was without a doubt one of the best Chicago PD officers.
As soon as Olinsky gets here, we're gonna set him.
Even worse is that he'd still be alive if Voight had taken rid of Kevin Bingham's body instead of leaving it in a shallow grave. He might have tried to get revenge, but he doesn't care for Justin on the daily. Voight doesn't send his son away soon enough, so Justin never gets better. Hank knows that a bad-mannered child like Justin Voight's only going to get him into more trouble in Chicago, but he never gets him out of the city fast enough.
You shoot him and wrap him in barbed wire?
No, man, that wasn't me. It was all Kevin.
Kevin who?
Kevin Bingham, a guy I work with sometimes. He used to bang that girl Melissa when they were younger.
We gotta talk.
Hey, congratulations, you guys are all over the news.
What happened?
I had an angle, and I played it.
Instead, he focuses on finding him small jobs here and there. By the time Hank gives up and signs Justin up for the army, it's a little too late. Soon after, the character dies, which drives Hank to the point where he's almost crazy. People can understand why he'd want to be near his son, but he should have done what was smarter. It looks like Voight's bad at intervening with other people too, not just his own son.
Where's Kevin now?
Hiding.
Voight's choice to let Brennan decide her own fate turns out to be a mistake. Deputy Superintendent Catherine Brennan is one of the only police officers Voight can trust on for a long. She helps him get out of problems with the law a few times, but he makes horrible choices during the events that lead to her collapse. Even though the sergeant agrees with Brennan's intentions to kill herself instead of getting caught, he doesn't tell his officers about it. That's why when Halstead and Upton come to arrest her, Brennan thinks Voight set her up.
Man, put the gun down.
Get out.
Kate, stop. Please put it down.
I am the one responsible. What's she doing?
She's taking a bullet for Calvin.
Things turn out this way because Voight does a bad job of handling the matter. It would have been better to try to talk her out of the idea or just tell the police. But even when he does intervene, it can sometimes go the opposite direction of what he wanted. Dawson gets justice because of Voight, but that only makes him worse. In Chicago PD, Voight comforts Dawson. In one of the saddest episodes of Chicago PD, Voight finds the man who took Dawson's daughter, and he delivers him to the officer. As someone who likes to see bad guys injured, he watches Dawson get violent, but the kidnapper dies when he falls out of the window.
Whoa. Just got a call from my Fed. Carl Hearns, aka Ginger.
Dawson doesn't need justice, and giving it to him won't assist him in any way because it'd simply make him feel bad. When he feels this way and is also struggling with drug addiction, he gets worse. So the officer's life keeps getting worse and worse until he's just a shell of who he used to be. Obviously, Voight should have dealt with the bad guy on his own, and that wasn't the only time he gets someone else involved in something they really regret.
You sure about this?
Well, it's the only thing that makes sense.
Nathan Whitcomb. Don't let the nice house fool you. Get a warrant for Cullen's address, have the others meet us there.
Alinsky's life also gets worse because of Voight. Alinsky isn't perfect, but he wasn't quite as awful as Voight before Browning was killed. After Alinsky's associate is killed, Voight takes the person who did it and Alinsky on a boat cruise. That's where they both execute the man. This experience affects Alinsky badly, making him more likely to kill like Voight. In later episodes, you witness a darker side of him instead of the nice dad image you were used to seeing. It's another one of those times when we wish Voight could have handled it on his own without bringing in anybody else.
Might have another weapon on his ankle. Be careful.
Our main character doesn't just kill people, he also hurts them in other ways that makes it really hard to like him. Trezel's kidnapping and abuse by Voight is hard to watch. Voight kidnaps and tortures Trezel so that he won't be a bad influence on D'Antoni, who he wants to help become a better person. His intentions are good, since he wants to get D'Antoni to become a confidential informant, but what he does makes him look bad.
No, I basically look people in the eye for a living. You have a future beyond this neighborhood, D'Antoni. It's okay to want that.
Even while the intelligence unit's acts don't hurt anybody else, they make him look like he's merely doing it for pleasure, which hurts his popularity. After all, he may hire as confidential informants hundreds of gang members in Chicago.
Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine.
He could have been marinating a chicken and spilled barbecue sauce on his
You
pants.
got 3 ODs traced back to the heroin reps moving. You want to wait for another kid to die?
He's got no good reason to be so obsessed with and possessive of one of them. This abuse was obviously on purpose, but there are times when people just suffer because they're associated with them. The fact that Voight likes to hang out with his daughter-in-law puts her life in danger. Voight should know better than to spend a lot of time with someone he cares about.
I don't know where I'm going.
Just keep driving. Girl was tortured with barbed wire. That means the killer either wanted something from her or...
Still, he does that with his daughter-in-law, Olive. When gangsters try to rob him, they take both of them hostage. When Olive gets sliced in the stomach, it's almost a tragedy. She almost loses her unborn child.
Says I have to get him in your house. Said if I didn't, he'd cut the baby out of me.
For Voight, the effects are worse than he thought they'd be. Olive starts to hang out with him less and less, leaving him alone. Later in the series, she even decides to leave Chicago.
Alinsky's dead.
I know.
Yeah, things worked out. I tell you, I got no choice to admit this somehow.
That's all for Hank Voight's biggest mistakes in Chicago PD.
And as soon as you start to lose them, take them down. They didn't do you justice, Hank.
They set you up to fail. 50-21 shots fired at the police on site. Galloway medals. 2133 Rexford Road. We're getting down and dirty, Chief.
No, I didn't do nothing wrong.
And get historical locations on her car from NVLS.
On it, boss.